Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Asher Agency, a full-service marketing agency with offices in Indiana, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. For nearly 50 years, Asher has helped our clients tell their stories, reach customers and prospects, and stand out from the crowd. To learn more about how we can help your company, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. My guest is Krista Stockman. Krista, how you doing?
Great. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much for doing this at a very busy time, but I suppose it's always a very busy time. You never really get a break. People think schools have summer off, but you really don't have summer off.
No, it's just a different season for us. There's always something to do. In the summer, we're getting ready to go back to school. So wrapping up one year and getting ready for the next.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning of your career path. That's where I always like to start. And I'd like to hear a little bit about what you were thinking about career-wise and where that took you. You and I think we've known each other for a long time, back prior to when you worked with Fort Wayne Community Schools, and I first knew you as a journalist. So was your initial dream to follow that path, or was there something else entirely that you were thinking of doing?
Well, when I was in kindergarten, I wanted to be an artist.
Okay.
But then I worked with a sixth grade student to write a book about myself, and I was terrible at drawing. So I decided I needed to pick a different career path.
Yeah.
So by middle school, I took a yearbook class.
Okay.
We got the yearbook done early, and we had time to do some issues of a newspaper, and that just really intrigued me. It just sparked something in me. I'd always been a good writer, but that style of, taking information and sharing it, putting it in a format that made sense to other people was just, it struck a chord with me.
And remind me, if you don't mind, where in the world were you at that time? Because you didn't grow up in this part of the world, correct?
No, I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, which isn't that so much different than Fort Wayne. It's a, blue-collar industrial town, smaller than Fort Wayne, but what I've learned is Fort Wayne feels so small that Rockford actually felt bigger to me growing up.
Interesting.
Fort Wayne just has so many connections, and everybody knows everybody. So
absolutely, everybody knows everyone. So you decide after some yearbook work that journalism is a path you might want to take. So what do you do about that in terms of where you went to college and what you pursued early on in your career?
Yeah, I actually based my high school choice on journalism. My parents gave me the choice between public school and private school.
Yeah.
But the private school, I wouldn't have been able to pursue journalism until my junior year.
Okay.
And so I decided to go to the public school, which was a great choice for me.
Yeah.
And then again, I thought I might go to Iowa State University, which has a great journalism program. But I went and visited Marquette University in Milwaukee, and again, just fell in love and decided that's where I wanted to be. And so I graduated as a journalism major. There are not that many people I know that decide what they want to do when they're 14 and actually graduate with that degree, but I really stuck with it. And then from there, I had, probably 4 or 5 different newspapers that I worked at over 10 years. The last one was the Journal-Gazette. And so it was actually the jobs that brought my husband and I to Fort Wayne. We both worked at the Journal-Gazette.
Okay. Is that where you met?
Nope. We met in Freeport, Illinois.
Okay. So Fort Wayne was a different place back when you started working at the Journal-Gazette, while it's still, as you mentioned, a small town, much smaller town. And you had no prior association with Fort Wayne prior to coming here for Journal-Gazette work? Yeah. So what types of writing were you doing? What was your beat, so to speak, as a journalist?
So when I first started, and a lot of people when they're first starting in newspapers, it's just, city council, county council, the cops beat, maybe some education reporting. But as I grew in my journalistic interests and moved from paper to paper, I really started focusing more on education. My minor was actually criminology, and I thought that might be the path that I went. But as I learned more about education and started writing about education, there's so much there, and it is so important for people to understand the education system in their community, in their state, it is heavily funded by taxpayers, by state government, by federal government. And so as a journalist, I just really wanted people to understand their school systems and just all that brings to a community.
Well, and this is a path we may go down or may decide not to go down. But one thing I think became very apparent during the pandemic was how integral school systems are beyond education, with school lunch programs and with the ability of parents to get to work and know their kids are in a safe place during school, before and after school. I think everybody knew that, but it became sort of palpable in 2020 and 2021.
Absolutely.
And reflects what you're saying, that it really is in a number of ways integral to the success of a community for people to have a working life, for kids to get socialization, all those things. So you are working on the journalism side of education, and then what happens that takes you to Fort Wayne Community Schools? Because that's a pretty big switch to go to the other side of the table, so to speak.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I was a journalist to my core.
Yeah.
I had ink in my veins. I mean, I love newspapers. But then I had 2 kids, and journalists' hours are not great. There's a lot of nights. There's plenty of weekends.
Yeah.
And with my husband and I both being journalists, when the position came open at Fort Wayne Community Schools, I knew that I really had to think about making the switch, even though I had never wanted to switch into PR.
Yep.
But I also knew that if I ever was going to switch, that it had to be something that I truly believed in, because it is too hard to get up and talk to people and explain things to people if you don't believe what you're talking about.
Sure.
So the opportunity came up, and I was offered the position, and I made the switch in 2007.
Okay. So, it's part of a larger trend where I think at the beginning of my career, there were maybe 2 PR people for every 1 journalist, or the number even may have been the reverse. And now it's like there's 80 PR people for every 1 journalist. So it's part of a, it's up to the listener to decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's certainly how things have evolved. What was that work like at the outset of you joining Fort Wayne Community Schools? What type of work are you involved in? What was the environment like?
So it's really hard to even compare what we do today to 2007. When I walked into my office in 2007, I had a computer. I don't even think I had a laptop then. I didn't have a cell phone. I had...
Some days you wish you probably didn't. Yeah.
I forget what kind of device I had, but I didn't even have a cell phone.
Yeah.
Social media was not a factor. My job was really to assist the superintendent in whatever communications she might have, and to handle the media. And that was pretty much it.
Yeah. So when you started in that role, what was the structure of the team you worked with? Were you leading the team? Were you working under someone else's supervision? Were you working directly with the superintendent?
So my title was Public Information Officer.
Yep.
And I was part of the Public Affairs Department. And so we had a Director of Public Affairs. We had a secretary who worked with us. So I reported to the Director of Public Affairs, but I also worked closely with the superintendent. Yep.
So obviously that has changed, as you mentioned, quite dramatically. So tell, if you don't mind, most people are going to be familiar, most people listening to this podcast are going to be very familiar with Fort Wayne Community Schools. But if you were describing FWCS to someone who didn't know anything about it, how would you describe the entity that you're part of?
So we are the largest school district in Indiana, the largest traditional public school district. We are a diverse urban district, and that diversity is something that we celebrate every day. It is the reason my own kids went through Fort Wayne Community Schools, and it continues to be the reason year after year why people tell us they choose us. We provide a great education. But I think the bigger piece is that people know when they send their kids to us that they are getting a real world experience in the classroom in ways that go beyond just the textbooks.
Mm-hmm. And did you decide to send your kids to FWCS schools before you were working for the district, or was that after you had started working for Fort Wayne Community Schools?
It was actually after. So my daughter was 3 when I started working with Fort Wayne Community Schools, and we had put her in the lottery for Bunch, and she didn't get in as a P3. And, we really had to decide. We live right by St. Jude. We go to St. Jude. We really had to decide, do we want public school or private school?
Yeah.
I had a choice either way. And as we really looked around, we decided we need our kids in the diversity of Fort Wayne Community Schools.
Yep.
And so we did eventually. She got into Bunch. My son went to Bunch and followed that path all the way. My daughter graduated last year. My son's graduating this year. And the experiences that they have had it's just unbelievable. The students that they have come in contact with from, their cultural differences, socioeconomic differences, even, intellectual ability differences. It's just, it really runs the gamut. And that's just their world. That is just the world they are growing up in.
Well, it prepares you better for the rest of your life, because that's what, most work environments are like, and that's what most social environments are like. So, Krista, there's some people who, while I think a lot of people know the realities for school systems today, there's some folks who might say, well, why does the school system need a director of communication and marketing? Don't students just go to the school district where they live? And you've alluded to, the lottery and all those things. So tell us a little bit about what your role involves and why you need to market FWCS.
Well, the first thing I tell people is taxpayers should expect us to communicate with them. Again, they put a lot of money into the system, and they deserve to know what is going on with the schools. They deserve to know how the money is being spent. They deserve to know the outcomes and what we're doing to prepare students to become citizens in the future. And so I think that's the first thing, is that schools need to be transparent. And so they need communication experts to help them with that transparency. But also, especially in Indiana, and really this is growing across the country, but Indiana is a leader in school choice and school competition. So when I started, in 2007, we did have charter schools. Those were a few years old. We did not yet have vouchers. When vouchers came into play, so we were already having some competition with charter schools, but when vouchers came into play, that really changed the landscape. And so the state of Indiana told us, we want you to be competitive. We want you to act like a business. We want to treat this like a marketplace. Well, that means you have to have marketing. And so we really increased just the amount of advertising, social media, every different aspect of marketing. We had to increase that. And so, we looked at how do private schools do this, because they've been doing it for forever. They always had to attract students. And so, we looked at how they did things, and we adapted some of those strategies. And it's just our world today.
And obviously, a lot more work comes with those realities than when you started working for FWCS. So what does the team look like today, the team you're working with? How is it structured, and how does the work get done?
So today, I am the Director of Communication and Marketing. I have a communication manager, and he is the one that sort of does my old role. He is the spokesperson. He helps out with social media. He helps out with web content. He works closely with the schools to make sure that we're getting their stories and know what's going on so that we can share that with the media and with the community. I have a marketing manager, and she is in charge of our marketing strategies, looking at different areas that we should be pursuing and focusing on. She also oversees our student recruitment and retention coordinator. And so that person is responsible for just going out into the community and finding ways to recruit students. So working closely with daycare providers, making sure parents have information that they need to register their kids, just awareness of our programs, going out to events throughout the summer, throughout the school year. And then we have a brand specialist, and so she is responsible for basically making sure that our branding is consistent, that logos look good, that our colors and fonts are being used properly. And then we have a video content specialist, and he does a lot of our video storytelling and some additional graphic design. So. And then we still have our secretary who assists us and keeps us all straight.
So who's responsible for social media? Who's doing that work on the team?
Thank heavens it is not me anymore.
Yeah.
I did it for, 12 years. It was just me.
Yeah.
And now my brand specialist takes care of that.
Well, that's a big job for anyone, and especially when it comes to something people are as passionate about as their kids' school system. So I'm sure that's a big job, and there's a lot of stories you could tell about that.
Yes.
But, one of the couple of things I want to talk about that you've navigated, Krista, that might be unique. One is moving to the other side of the conversation, being someone who reported on schools and then being the person who was working with journalists reporting on schools. What was that transition like? What's been fulfilling in that? What's been challenging in that?
Yeah, I think at first the most challenging thing was just learning what to say and how to say it and when to say it.
Yeah.
There were many times when I would watch myself on TV or read something in the paper and go, oh, that is not how I wanted that to come out.
Yeah.
But I knew I said it. And so it was just really trying to figure out where's that balance. And I have to remember now that these aren't my colleagues anymore the way they used to be.
Yeah.
And so I can't maybe say the things that I used to say.
Yeah. Were you working with reporters that you knew and had worked alongside?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big challenge.
Yeah, it was. But I think the other thing, the real advantage that I had coming into this position was that a lot of times people have a really negative view of reporters and they think they're just out for blood or, trying to just get headlines. And I know that's not true in the vast majority of cases. They are trying to do their job. They're trying to tell a story. And so since I had that understanding, I was just willing to talk with them maybe a little bit more. A lot of people are fearful of the media and what happens if I talk to them and how's this going to make me look? And so I really would try to put people at ease. If I could take the interview, I would take the interview. If I needed someone else to talk, then I would just, walk them through it and say, look, this is just a person. Maybe they have a camera. Maybe they have a pen and paper. Just tell what you know.
Well, and that's where the experience of being on the other side of the conversation was probably very helpful and took a lot of the fear out of it. I mean, I think the time that I was growing up, the media, it was perceived very differently. And it was, these are folks who are out to tell the truth and, who were really revered in most communities. And that's for my money, it's sad that it's changed in some respects. But in a community the size of Fort Wayne, you don't have as much of that, I think. I think people understand that there's a role for the media, an important role, and that it really can be a collaboration on the PR side to make sure the community is informed about things they need to be informed about. One of the things that probably made that, and this is going to be the understatement of the week, but one of the things that probably made that tremendously challenging was the pandemic and the reality of trying to communicate at a time when there was a lot of fear and when there was a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty. This is a question that would probably take you a week to answer, but how did you and your team navigate all that? How did you make it through that and make sure that you were getting accurate and good information out to the public while at the same time trying to mitigate risk and some of the challenges you were facing?
So actually at that time, my team is only about a year old. At that time, there were still just three of us. And it was very confusing. It was scary for people. We didn't have answers. We were being told in some cases what to do. We didn't know is there going to be another announcement tomorrow? Is this going to change again? So eventually what we sort of settled into was, we would give parents updates as we had them. That summer, our new superintendent started. And so that was also a challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going through the pandemic.
Yeah, and Dr. Robinson had been in place for how many years at that time?
She was superintendent for 17 years.
Wow, yeah.
So she was retiring. We're bringing in a new superintendent. And since he was new, it just gave him an opportunity to right away start communicating with parents regularly. So they started hearing his voice, seeing his face. It wasn't easy, but our families, I think, really trusted us that we were going to make the best decision with the information we had at the time.
Yeah.
And I think they just really relied on us for whatever we could provide the kids. I mean, they gave us a lot of grace. We tried to give the kids a lot of grace.
Yeah, for sure.
And just keep them informed along the way. We really, a lot of school districts had started to have a lot of pushback, especially in the second year of the pandemic. And our families we didn't have so much of that.
Yeah.
And I think we were very fortunate.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And that probably is an indication of trust, that and it's obviously something that is hard won when you're talking about people's kids and their future. So kudos for that. I'm sure it was very difficult, but sounds like it was about as good as you can expect in that situation.
Yeah.
So Krista, with that, hopefully that part of your career behind you, what are some of the things you're working on now? What are some of the big items on your to-do list, things that are priorities for you as you look ahead?
Well, as you mentioned, Fort Wayne has changed a lot in the past 20 years, and the education system really has changed as well. And that was one of the things with Fort Wayne Community Schools when I came on board. I had covered schools in a lot of different areas, different parts of the country, and what stood out about Fort Wayne Community Schools is that they were always trying to be better. That, people could say whatever they wanted about them, but you could never say that they weren't trying to be better.
Yep.
And maybe they didn't have the test scores that other districts have, but they were really focused on improving the lives of children. And so I would say that attitude has brought us to where we are today and where we're going to continue moving in the future. My own kids went through the New Tech Academy at Wayne.
Yep.
And that was a program that came in. Businesses actually challenged us to say, hey, we've seen this model. This brings in real world to kids.
Yeah.
They get to work on projects. This is something we want to see. And so we looked at it and we said, okay, let's try it out.
Yeah.
Amp Lab just opened last year. My daughter went through that. Again, I mean, this is such an innovative program where kids are learning how to be entrepreneurs. And how we've been able to meld the standards that kids need to learn and just learning about businesses. Many kids are running their own businesses out of there. And so where we're heading, we are launching what we're calling Schools of Success. Some people may have heard about. We've completed our Portrait of a Graduate. We've been working with Forward Next Generation Learning, which is a philanthropic arm of the Ford Foundation. And what we're looking at is those opportunities that kids have had at New Tech or at Amp Lab. We want to make sure everyone has those opportunities and that they know when they graduate from high school that they have the skills to be employable, that they have the knowledge to enroll in a post-secondary education if that's what they want, or that they're ready to enlist in the military if that's what they want. Or if they're ready to start their own business, that they can go into entrepreneurism. And so people are going to start hearing more about this. We're not trying to pigeonhole kids or put them into a career in 9th grade, but we want to make sure they have those skills so that they can get hired and so that they can be productive citizens.
Yeah, and so many of those skills that we look at as entrepreneurial skills are really what we used to call the soft skills that you need regardless of where you go. And that, most employers, I would say almost all employers, would welcome someone who has that entrepreneurial spirit, who can think like a business owner, who has the ability to work, autonomously and get things done. So kudos to you and FWCS for instilling that in kids at a young age, because it's amazing to me in what I've seen from a distance how much kids are capable of if you don't impose limits on them. They really can think in very creative ways that compete really well against people who've been in the workforce for a long time.
Yeah, it's funny. We have some interns that work in our building that work on videography and graphic design, and the stuff that these kids come up with, I'm like, wow. I mean, I'd hire you today.
Yeah, for sure.
You're 17. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, and there's such a need to have young people communicate in a way that's going to reach their peers in a way that, quite honestly, I can't, because things are so fragmented today. If you want to reach 19, 20-year-olds, the best creators of content are going to be 18, 19, and 20-year-olds.
Right.
So, teaching them those skills, those creative skills, and obviously I'm biased because that's the work that I do. But whatever those skills are, there's so many great opportunities. Another thing that I think is unique about the community we're in, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier, is the degree to which your students, after they finish, high school, and while they're in high school, can build great relationships pretty quickly in Fort Wayne because everyone knows everyone. There's enough opportunity here. If a student wants to get connected to a career path, they can do that pretty easily through the staff at FWCS, through their teachers, through community connections. So, really great to be able to take advantage of that and just expose students to what's possible, give them a sense of what's out there.
Yeah, that's really a big part of it is, when a student in second grade goes to the Survive Alive house. Mm-hmm. So they're learning those safety skills, right?
Yeah.
But also, what if we think about, well, who are these people working here? Mm-hmm. What does a firefighter do?
Yeah.
And what is the career path to become a firefighter? So not that you're talking about coursework and hours, all that stuff to a 9-year-old, but just starting to lay that foundation so that they can envision themselves as something in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when I was a kid, I had none of that and desperately needed it. I got a later start on my career path that I would have liked. But I remember just the idea of going to work was a mystery to me. I was like, how do people do that? And what happens when they leave the house? So kudos to you and the rest of the FWCS team for giving kids that opportunity. So, Krista, I'm going to pivot to a few questions that kind of reflect some of the things we've discussed. And one has to do with your career path and what you've learned along the way. Obviously, you've had a variety of experiences as a journalist and for the past 16 plus years at FWCS. What have you learned along the way about building a successful and fulfilling career? What's the most important advice you might want to pass along when it comes to others who may be pursuing a career in marketing, but really any career?
I think one of this has been really important for me over the past year as my team has grown and as I've become the director of this team, is to trust others. There are so many great ideas out there.
Yeah.
And to be open to suggestions that you hadn't thought of. Mm-hmm. I don't ever want to think of myself as the smartest person in the room because I'm certainly not. At the same time, I do know that I am an expert in certain things, and I will share those opinions with you when it is appropriate. But there is a lot that I do not know. And so I am constantly trying to learn and to let others on my team lead when they are the experts in what they're doing. So I think that's part of it. And I think 20 years ago, I don't think I could have said the same thing. I think some of that comes, just with confidence and years of experience and being able to say, no, it's okay that I don't know everything.
Yeah. Sometimes it's more valuable to know the people who know how to get it done. And another thing that's evolved, I completely agree that it's confidence and it's experience. But, it's also a reflection of how technical a lot of the skills have gotten. I joke with our podcast producer, Nick, all the time that I couldn't do what he does at all. I just show up and talk. And you really need to find people who complement your skills and be okay with that and say, I'm never going to know it all. If I stay in my lane and I do a deep dive on what I do well, that's probably going to serve me better than trying to learn everything and compete against all the smart people who already have that incumbent knowledge.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a related question, and I'm going to throw a curveball at you here. But there's a lot of folks who are thinking about, okay, the world of journalism is changing. Many people who are saying, I'm in it, that's my career, that's what I want to do. And there's others who are thinking about maybe making a pivot. What's your best advice for someone who may be thinking about, I've been doing this and I might want to do something different? How do you successfully make that pivot if you're ready for a change?
Well, like I said, when I was a journalist, I knew that whatever I switched to, I would have to believe in it. And so if I wasn't going to be writing as a journalist every day, what could I still do that I would have a passion for?
Yeah.
And so my husband, he doesn't work for the Journal-Gazette anymore either. He writes for a national publication where he only writes about Catholic sisters. Mm-hmm. And he loves it.
Yeah.
And it is, this niche publication, and he has found a different area to pursue a similar passion, but, still in a little bit different field. He's not going to city council meetings. Yeah. And so I think...
And he's probably happily not going to city council meetings. No offense to the city council folks.
I don't know. He misses writing about sewers and all that kind of stuff. I don't know.
And who wouldn't? Yeah.
There's something wrong with him. But he's, we have to have people like that in the world, I guess.
For sure.
But yeah, I think it's just, taking that step is just finding your next passion, really. And wherever you go, this is what I tell my kids all the time. If you make a decision, you do something and you go, you know what? That wasn't the right step for me. I really don't like this.
Yeah.
Okay, well then take a different step.
Yeah.
That will be an experience you can grow on and you can learn from, and then you can move on to something different. And I mean, in this world today, you don't have to stay at a place for 50 years.
Yeah, for sure.
Get some experience, figure out, I like this. I don't think I really expected that I would be in this position for 17 years. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I thought when I started, but I had never been at a job more than 2 or 3 years to that point.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. So, Krista, the next question I want to ask you has to do with the organization you work for and the work that you do. What's one myth or misconception, either about FWCS or about the world of education, that you believe should be cleared up, something you want to disabuse people of, or maybe something that's not well known enough that you want to amplify?
Well, I think one of the biggest things for Fort Wayne Community Schools is there are a lot of people who think maybe we're not as rigorous as other schools or other districts, that our students don't achieve at a high level, that somehow there's chaos in our buildings every day. We have an event called Principal for a Day, which I think you've
I was, it was years and years ago, and it was a great experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and when people do that, they come into our buildings, they spend a morning with a principal and see what's going on in our schools. One of the most often heard comments at our luncheon is, I can't believe how quiet and respectful the students were.
Yeah.
Well, we're not operating in a movie set. And so, yes, kids are quiet and respectful, and they are there to learn.
Yeah.
And our test scores may not be what you see in other districts, but our students, we have a different population of students, and our growth often exceeds what you see at the state level because we are really moving those kids forward. And again, for us, that's number one. Our kids are not a test score.
Yeah.
We want to make sure they're prepared for life.
Yeah.
And I've yet to take a standardized test in my career. So
yeah. So
I would rather have kids who are
sure.
articulate, who can think through a problem, than who can ace a test.
Well, and one of the things that I'm most impressed with at FWCS is the opportunity for kids to focus in depth on a certain area, whether it's the arts, whether it's music, whether it's the entrepreneurial side. Quite honestly, my son went to a public school system and he didn't get that. He got a good education. It was a broad education, but I love the fact, there's children of Asher, of our employees here, who have gone on to great things and are prepared for great things because Fort Wayne Community Schools has helped them find a path and then dive deep into that path. And I think that's pretty impressive. And I wouldn't know that if I didn't have coworkers who had lived that through their kids.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's really what we want for kids is, again, when they graduate, we want them to know that they have a direction. Maybe they can't decide which direction today because they're passionate about 5 different things.
Yeah.
I talked to a student yesterday. She was one of the designers of the new Snyder Panther logo. Mm-hmm. She is an amazing graphic artist.
Yeah.
She also is really interested in occupational therapy and working with children.
Yeah.
2 very different careers.
Yeah, for sure.
And she's not quite sure which direction she wants to go.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And, when I think of myself at that age, she's probably miles ahead of where I was, and I didn't have any idea. It's part of the process, right, is working that out. But having that opportunity to be exposed to different career paths and then really dig in deep and be hands-on, I think is pretty unique and pretty great. All right, so this is the one that sometimes trips people up, but it has to do with the way in which you and your teams work. Is there any tool, call it a hack, call it an app, call it what you want, it doesn't have to be technology, something that you use in your work that you really appreciate, that you think would benefit other people who do the type of work you do, or maybe any type of work for that matter?
Well, I'm not a graphic designer by trade. And so I cheat and I use Canva a lot.
Yeah.
And their new AI graphic thing, I've just been playing with that because it comes up with some really crazy things, most of which I wouldn't use because they look ridiculous, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I think on the technology side, that is one thing that, because that's not my natural born skill, that I rely on that. I also recognize that when I want something really unique and different, that's not the tool.
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
I have people that can go above and beyond, or we work with an agency like Asher.
Well, I think Canva is a really great representation of kind of one of the things that I'm looking for when I ask that question, because it's fills such a unique gap. I learned PageMaker 6.5 a million years ago, and stopped. The world is better because I stopped being a graphic designer. But I couldn't jump back in. Like 2 years later, I was like, I wouldn't know how to use those tools at all. You have to work in them every day. So if you would ask me to design something, short of doing it in PowerPoint and it looking very bad, but Canva kind of fills a gap. And it does get a bad reputation sometimes from people who are, really focused on the highest end tools and the highest end product. And I think you make a great point that there's absolutely a need for that. But for the rest of us, Canva kind of helps. And in my mind, it can really focus those professionals on the things that I can't do, even if I had the right tools. So yeah.
And it makes me look really impressive when I make social media graphics for my church.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my gosh, Krista, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and one thing I'd go to bat for, and you just inspired this thought, but help your audiences promote your work by giving them graphics. If you want parents to talk about an event at school, say, here's a graphic, just post that. Here's some copy, just post that. And Canva makes that possible. I think the rise of Canva is directly parallel to the content beast that social media is. Back when I started my career in marketing, you needed content, but it was high quality and it was infrequent, and now it's all the time, and it's not all high quality. Sometimes it's just to fill a gap, and Canva's kind of grown up alongside that. And one of the things it allows for is to make it easy for people who aren't designers to share stories on social media and make it easy for their audiences to be part of that conversation. So, it's a great little tool that sometimes gets a bad name in our world, and I'm glad that you spoke well of it, because not everyone does. Yeah. Well,
People
Krista,
are probably turning it off now and not listening to us anymore.
Well, that's my fault entirely, as it usually is on these podcasts. Well, Krista, this has been great fun. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for telling us your story. And thanks to everybody who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.